Don't adjust your screen. It is not deja vu. The Dallas Stars and Edmonton Oilers with a trip to the Stanley Cup Final on the line. I'm joined by Joey Erickson of Locked On Stars for a very special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Stars. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That's Joey Erickson, the host of Locked On Stars. We want to thank everyone that's making our shows their first listen of the day. Both Locked On Oilers and Locked On Stars are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we cover your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money, who want you to help take control of your finances and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com. for 50% off your first year. Joey, my friend, it's a pleasure to be back here. It's an honor to be in the Final Four once again. I feel like the elephant in the room is the one really big difference between these two teams year over year. So I'm going to ask you the most obvious layup first question.
Okay.
Let's say after last year's Western Conference Finals, I went into a coma for 12 months and I just woke up today. What do I need to know about the Dallas Stars that I might have missed in the last 12 months?
Well, they have Mikko Rantanen. That is the biggest difference with this year's Dallas Stars team. But they also added some nice pieces in Mikael Granlund, and they also have Cody Ceci, which I know isn't a sexy name, as many Oilers fans know, but he's been rather serviceable here in Dallas this season, but it really all goes through Mikko, the Moose Rantanen, and he's had an incredible postseason. He put the Stars on his back to even get them into the second round with that Game 7 performance against Colorado. He leads the playoffs in scoring. He went a bit quiet towards the end of this series against the Jets, but man, he looks amazing. He looks beautiful in victory green, and I think Stars fans are very, very happy that he's going to be around for the next 8 years.
Really quick, before I let you ask me a similar type of question, what does that do to their lineup? Because for a while now, the Stars have boasted one of the deepest forward groups in the NHL, and dropping a guy who's capable of playing 22 or 23 minutes a night, all situations, that has a trickle-down effect. What has that done to their group?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And the last two games against Winnipeg, we've seen the Stars deploy 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. And that's not like Pete DeBoer. And Pete DeBoer also stated, it was in an ESPN article recently, and I thought it was really curious, some of his thoughts on getting a player like Mikko Rantanen. And he mentioned they have to do some things differently because he can play 21, 22 minutes a night. And with Miro Heiskanen just coming back off an injury, they wanted to kind of ease his way back into the lineup. So with the 11 forward deployments, they were able to give Mikko some more reps, and he was playing with everybody. He was playing with Sam Steele and Dadonov, which is the Stars' fourth line. He was playing with Wyatt Johnston and Jason Robertson, and of course, he's playing with Henson Granlund. So it really has changed the mindset, or I think approach, for Pete DeBoer in the Stars, which is interesting because as we know, Pete DeBoer, he's always kind of been the stubborn guy, right? He runs 4 lines, he runs 6 defensemen, and that's kind of how it's been, for better or for worse. And he's sort of changed that up, and that I think Game 6 was a great example of that. Like Miro played, I think, 22 minutes. Mikko played 24, and Harley played, I think, somewhere 25. And I know they had overtime in there, but he was throwing all the big guns out there to try to win that game in regulation. Of course, they had to finish it off in overtime, but they got the job done. So that's where I think the Stars have differed with him in the lineup and sort of that trickle-down effect.
In terms of where the Stars are at, they've been lingering around this conversation for a while as the next team up. They've made a couple conference finals now. They have a Stanley Cup Final appearance. And when I talked to you about this last year, and when I talked to you around the trade deadline, we felt that it wasn't so much that they weren't good enough. It's just that's the way hockey goes sometimes, that the other team, sometimes they just win. And that's kind of the nature of the game, where it's cruel and unfortunate. You can play better, you can deserve to win, but that doesn't always mean that's going to happen. The Stars are very well positioned to do this for a while now. They've got a pretty young core that's reasonably controlled. At this point, do you feel it's a matter of just getting the right supporting cast around your building blocks? Or is there something else? Is there something innate that they're missing?
Well, I think something that they were missing maybe in years past and has been clicking for them and has been a big reason why they've been able to make it to this point is sort of the old cliche in special teams and goaltending. Not that Jake Ottinger was ever a big issue, but special teams in particular, because you mentioned where sometimes you think you outplay a team and you lose. Well, this postseason, it's been weird where it feels like Dallas has been outplayed but they're winning because they're scoring those timely goals, and we saw that quite a bit in the Jets series. They just scored at really opportunistic times, and sometimes that can carry you through the postseason. I would say that's what's been a bit different, been a difference. But as we saw last season too, the Star special teams really dried up against Edmonton. They were very, very good on the PK against Dallas, so it's going to be a really, really fun chess match during this series between both of these teams. But I think that's what's sort of been different. They've just seemed to have some of those clutch moments. I suppose, of course, they've won 3 overtime games, which helps. And the depth of is of course there, but they're not always relying on that as much. Like Sam Steele scored a big goal in game 6. Like, that's not a guy that they're looking to score. So when you can get those type of moments from some of those guys, it's great. But it's nice to have a guy you can kind of lean on like 96 a bit. And he's shown that. And the Stars are getting a bit healthier as the playoffs have gone on, which has been nice. And I say this with the respect of Jason Robertson, who doesn't have a goal in the playoffs yet, and he hasn't really looked like himself. So it'll be fascinating. And we talked last year a lot, Nick, and thinking that, I was really confident about Dallas, and I think the Oilers humbled a lot of Stars fans, including myself. And now I go in very nervous and looking at the Oilers team that looks like they're deeper. They looks like they got better. I think maybe they underperformed in the regular season. If I had to say, I thought they were going to win the West. They were going to be up there. But here we are again. So I guess that leads me into my first question too. Tell me about the Evander Kanes of the world, the Corey Perrys, and what they have done. That feels like a large difference from maybe a season ago, where they're not having to rely on 97 and 29 to do everything, who of course are going to get their looks, but specifically this depth and the pieces they added. And now it seems like maybe at this time of year, they're just playing their best.
So the big thing is that they have lines that play different styles now. Last year, it was a lot of off of the rush, and if that wasn't there, the offense was a lot harder to come by. And we'll see. The last 2 games against Vegas, they ran very different lineups than what they had run successfully earlier in the Vegas series or against LA. But Corey Perry was playing on the first line with McDavid and Draisaitl. Their second line was Nugent-Hopkins, Hyman, and Evander Kane, and they just played the game in a phone booth. They got the puck below the goal line. They put pressure on the defensemen, forced them to try and break out, and more often than not, they were winning those 50-50 pucks, created a lot of dangerous offense. And then the Henrique line has been kind of their buffer. They're going to get a lot of the defensive zone starts against the other team's best players, and they're out there with the intent of absorbing pressure and trying to counterattack going the other way, whether it's Janmark or Frederick on Henrique's left. It depends on the given game. And then Connor Brown on the right, who had a lot of success in last year's playoffs as a penalty killer and scoring off of the rush as well. And then their fourth line, Podkolzin's chipped in a couple nice goals. Janmark has chipped in a couple. They have found ways. Kapanen won them the game to go to the next round. Someone who hadn't played in almost a month. They have really found a mix of guys that play complementary styles to each other. And it's just given them different ways to beat teams that weren't there. That Kane and Perry both add an element of below the goal line, ruggedness, playing around the net front. So even if you're not scoring, you're making the defense play defense, and you're making that goalie move left to right. I mean, Aiden Hill was kind of at wit's end by the end of game 5, where he had the interaction, I guess you would call it, with Evander Kane after the whistle, where he kept like shrugging at his glove, like, all right, I'll fight you. Didn't ultimately do it. Kane took a penalty in that scrum, but the Oilers have added a bit more ruggedness and high danger offense. That's not just McDavid and Draisaitl trying to make things happen for themselves.
I think both of these teams may be around for the future. It may have a lot more meetings, maybe at this point or even earlier in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, the deadline for the Oilers maybe wasn't as sexy as Dallas, but I was watching the game the other night. I think it was game 5. And I'm watching John Klingberg look like John Klingberg in Dallas for a bit. And maybe I don't watch a ton of Oilers games. I'm just watching because it's the playoffs. I'm like, wow, he looks awesome. But Jake Wallman as well. Those two specific pickups for Edmonton, what have they done for this Oilers side?
So Klingberg played like 10 games in the regular season, and he looked terrible. He did not look comfortable. He couldn't move very well. He didn't really have a feel for the game. He'd played 12 games in like a year and a half. He played a couple games with the Leafs at the start of 23-24, and then sat out the entirety of last year, signed at the end of January, played 10-ish regular season games, went on LTIR, came back in against the Kings for Josh Brown after game 1, and he's been great. That second pair of him and Jake Wallman has been the ideal transition pair, where no matter where the puck is on the ice, both of them are very comfortable moving it, getting it where it needs to go, and playing complementary hockey to whatever forward group they happen to be out there with. Klingberg, I'm a bit more skeptical of him sustaining this just because he hasn't played that much in the last 2 years. And it's the same thing with Evander Kane, frankly. I think you can make a similar comparison where just hasn't played a lot of hockey, fresher than a lot of the guys he's out there against. And I think that definitely has been a factor. Wallman, I think this is what he is. He's really good on the puck. He's prone to taking stupid penalties because he loves getting involved after the whistle, but they have been a really ideal second pair. And Ekholm should be back at some point in this series, which is only going to elongate this group, whether that forces Troy Stetcher or someone else out entirely. That's another top 4 defender you can add back to this mix and deepen the group even further.
Well, the Stars have loved their stupid penalties too, Nick. Over the first 2 rounds, I've shaken my head at a lot of penalties the Stars have taken. So we'll see who wins that battle, I guess, in this 7-game series, because who knows who's going to hurt their team at one point in the next few weeks.
We are going to take our first break on this special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Stars. And coming up next, Joey and I are going to give you our key players and the big swings that this series will likely take. Coming up next. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's really easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. Hand up. When I first started using Monarch to track my spending, I became aware of how much I was door dashing and Uber Eatsing. Now I meal prep, I plan out my finances, I budget, and now I save more. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan out long-term financial goals like a vacation. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Joey and I on this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Stars. And not to make the very obvious pun, but there are a lot of stars in this series. These are 2 very talented teams. I venture to say these are probably the 2 most talented teams in the Western Conference. They both roll 4 lines that all play pretty well. I would venture to say the Stars have a slightly better defensive group by virtue of having 2 top 10 to 15 defensemen in the same group. And then the Stars have a very decisive edge in net between Ottinger and Skinner or Pickard, if Pickard does come back at some point in this series. But sitting here right now, What do you feel? Who do you feel is the key for the Stars in this series if they're going to have this go the opposite direction of last year?
Well, I'm going to throw a wild card for forward, and then I'll go to a more obvious choice for the back end. But I'm going to throw a bit of an X factor in there. I'm going to go with Evgenii Dadonov for whatever reason. I've liked his game in some of the big moments for Dallas, and he looked really good the other night in Game 6 against Winnipeg. He didn't end up with a shot on goal, which was kind of remarkable for how many almost point blank chances he had, but he gives Dallas that element of just speed on their fourth line. It's not your prototypical, I guess what you would say, sort of Evander Kane, Corey Perry, like below the goal line type of offense. Like Dadonov likes to stretch the ice out, and Pete DeBoer really trusts him. Basically, wherever Pete's gone recently, Dadonov sort of follows. And he only has one goal in the postseason, but it was a big one in Game 2 against Colorado. But he just seems to be in the right spot in some of those big moments. So, I mean, he scored 20 goals this season. It was a 20 goal score, which isn't half bad for a 35-year-old. So if you're in your mid-30s and you want to get your goal scoring touch back, you come to Dallas for whatever reason. The Stars have something in the water down here in the DFW Metroplex. But on the back end, what has to be different in particular, because I've said this about the Stars versus Colorado in years past and last year coming out, Miro Heiskanen has to be the best defense, or he has to outplay Evan Bouchard, who was phenomenal in that series against Dallas last season. I think he was maybe second in point. He may have been third behind McDavid, but I just remember him being an absolute menace offensively, and he played fantastic. And Miro wasn't up to standards, I think, to try to challenge him, because if he outplays Makar like he did a season ago, I think Harley outplayed Makar this year. And you mentioned the Stars have two sort of top 15 guys on the blue line, and it helps. Miro is fresh, which is nice. And you talked about Kane and Perry maybe not playing as much. Like, Miro hadn't played a game for over 3 months. So by the time he got to this point last year, he already logged so many minutes, because we know he played 28, pretty much 30 minutes a night because they needed him to. It's not really the case anymore with CC and stuff. And with him coming back, they can drop either CC down a spot or Lyubushkin, and it just moves everybody down a spot and puts them in more suitable roles, I think, moving forward. So if Miro looks like he did the other night, I think the Stars will be in decent hands.
So the obvious one for me is they need McDavid to get back to what he was doing a little bit earlier in the playoffs. And credit to Vegas, who is a very good defensive team. Yeah. They did a really nice job of diverting him. And when he gains the zone with speed, forcing him to the wall as opposed to letting him cut to the middle and using his speed to put their goalie in a disadvantageous position. So they need McDavid to just, I don't even need him to score more, just more zone time, more working, especially on the power play. I don't know if you know this or not. They have yet to score a power play goal on the road in the playoffs this year. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
through 2 series. And they're scoring on 25% of the power plays, so they're not playing terribly. Mm-hmm. But last year, that was their equalizer. They weren't a great 5-on-5 team, but they were the best special teams team in the playoffs. They got to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, a goal away from winning the whole thing. Their goal differential at even strength was 1. They were 43 goals for, 42 goals against, and they were a goal away from winning the Stanley Cup. That's how good their special teams were. And then the slightly lower off the radar, they need Zach Hyman to kind of find that gear. He's been floating around the periphery. He's had a couple of breakaways that last year they went in. You know, he had the one breakaway goal against the Stars, and I believe it was Game 6. He had a big one in Game 6 against Florida to force the Game 7. So for the Oilers, I can't believe I'm talking about forwards on a team where you look at the defense on paper and you'd probably be squinting, rubbing your eyes a little bit why I feel so confident in this group. But the way they've played LA, the way they've played Vegas, it's really been a trickle-down effect where the forwards play pretty well. They control the offensive zone time. The Oilers are leading the entire playoffs in most of the metrics, scoring chances, high danger chances, expected goals. They haven't had to play a lot of defense, which I do think will change in this series to some degree. And I'm very curious to see how the Oilers respond to that, because they've been very willing to play low scoring defense first games, especially the last two against Vegas, where they weren't really pushing for offense. They were playing a more defense oriented lineup where McDavid was playing with Hyman and Nugent-Hopkins, Draisaitl was playing with Kapanen and Podkolzin, and they dropped a lot of what had worked earlier because they felt they needed to prioritize defense more. Against the Stars, who, as you mentioned, you play a guy like Dadonov in your bottom six who has 20 goals, you kind of got to look for offense a little bit more. So I'll be very curious to see if the Oilers go back to the forward group that was putting up a ton of offense against LA and then earlier in that series against Vegas.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point you bring up, how Edmonton kind of was fine with the fact of playing a bit more defensively, because it's something I think maybe that struck me with the Stars a bit more, and maybe it just happened to be a one-off, but I feel at points they're almost more comfortable sort of being that counterpunch team instead of like the heavy possession extended zone. Like they're okay with just kind of trying to trap you at the neutral zone and create turnovers and counteract instead of just being that team of just constant pressure like we've seen. And maybe that's a good thing too, that they have different ways to go about their business instead of just hanging on to the, I guess, one way that works. Or maybe it's just because they're not playing very well. And we've seen at points on the road and home, like the splits have been pretty drastic for Dallas. They haven't been that great on the road. They've been shut up 3 times already this postseason. But the great thing is they've responded every time and they haven't lost back-to-back games. So I'm curious to see how Dallas looks on the road against Edmonton.
We are going to take one more and final break on this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Stars. We come back. Joey and I are going to give you our X factors, the key matchups, and pick the series. Be right back. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with us on this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Stars. I am Nick Zararis. That is Joey Erickson. All right, Joey. Give me your X factor. Is this as simple as Mikko Rantanen needs to have his signature moment a third time, or is it a little deeper than that?
I think it really is Mikko, just because like I sort of alluded to earlier in the episode. That's sort of the difference with Dallas. They sort of have a guy they can kind of lean on, and I think it's fair to say Mikko Rantanen is somewhere within the top 10 of elite players in the National Hockey League. I know there was a lot of flack with him throughout this season, but he's proven in the postseason he can be a dog. He's well over a point per game in his playoff career, and Stars fans have got to see that, and they've been able to unlock him too, because he wasn't humming off the hop against Colorado. It was just those last 3 games when he had 11 points or something like that. If he can have signature moments, in years past they've been looking for Jason Robertson to do that a bit, and we haven't really got that for him. It's really come more from Wyatt Johnston, which is weird, and he's their third line center. It's nice to have somebody like that coming out of 3-hole, but if Rantanen can be that guy for Dallas and just have some of those big moments, you're going to feel pretty decent about where the Stars are, because they're getting good goaltending. They're getting good enough defense for the most part. I think the Stars and Oilers defense is probably pretty similar in a lot of ways. I mean, maybe you give Dallas the edge, but I don't think both these teams are like lock it up and like, oh yeah, you're not going to score against us. I felt better defensively about the Stars last year when they had Chris Tanev, who's now still kicking it over in Toronto. But yeah, I think it really is simple. Like if Mikko Rantanen could be that guy, like that's going to be good for Dallas.
I feel like this is a coin flip. I really genuinely feel that this could go either way, and I wouldn't really be surprised unless it ends quick. That's really the only way I'd be surprised. If this was a 4 or 5 gamer, that would shock me. Otherwise, any of the other outcomes seem well within reason. My biggest X factor, the Oilers are going to need one of their defensemen that is not Evan Bouchard to just play a lot of minutes in this series. And Bouchard is a very volatile player because of his style, which skews towards offense. He's prone to the really big defensive mistake, but he's quieted down significantly as these playoffs have gone along. In my head, I want to say it has to be Darnell Nurse because Knoblauch trusts him so much and he plays, especially on the penalty kill, which has been really bad. It's the worst penalty kill of the teams that are left in the playoffs. They're only killing 67% of penalties so far in the playoffs, which is the clearest regression of all time after last year where they killed off 92 out of 96 in 25 playoff games, which was otherworldly. So I think my big X factor is going to be Darnell Nurse, or if Ekholm comes back early enough in this series that it's not just kind of a token. We're going 11-7 in a game 6 because we want to see if he can go. And he skated this morning. He looks okay, but they're playing it as slow as they can because they kind of rushed him back in the first place. And that's why this injury got worse. So I think it's Darnell Nurse for the Stars. As far as the key matchup for me, I think it depends if the Oilers play McDavid and Draisaitl together or not. Because if they play together, the Oilers haven't needed to kill their minutes because the depth scoring has been so good. They outscored the Golden Knights 9-4 at 5-on-5 in the series over 6 games, and that was enough with mediocre penalty killing and only an okay power play. So if they play together, I'm very curious to see who DeBoer deploys against them, whether it's defensemen. Do you want to give Harley the harder offensive minute assignment? Do you want to give Heiskanen those minutes and tell him, hey, just worry about the defense, worry about playing to not lose effectively, and then you win the rest of the minutes? Because I think that's the Stars' path. I think you try and contain Leon and Connor if they're together best you can. And then you hope that because your high-end guys are a little more sprinkled throughout your lineup, if you can get Wyatt Johnston out there consistently against an Adam Henrique line, I think you like that matchup a little bit more than you would if you were the Oilers. The question, of course, then becomes, well, how do the Oilers counterbalance that? And this is a great matchup as far as chess match because both of these teams have so many different permutations that can really work for them.
Yeah, and Dallas doesn't get a ton of offense from their back end. It's really 55 in 4s where you can expect it to come from. So if they do load them up, which I think is going to be DeBoer's plan probably off the hop, if let's say McDavid and Draisaitl are playing together, they're going to get a healthy dose of 4 and 55. And Dallas is just going to roll with that and try to win in some of the other matchups. But then that may hinder your offense a bit, and you're going to have to capitalize on some of the special teams then, because that's when you can get Harley and Miro out there a bit. And it's sort of, I guess, a similar game plan to when you kind of play the Colorados of the world. Can you contain 29? Can you contain Makar enough? And they usually get a healthy dose of Harley or Miro, whoever that number one is. Kind of nice. Dallas almost has 2 now, it feels like. And now they can just kind of load them up together because I think it benefits them both. And since Miro's just coming back, although he looks great, it does give Miro some protection to have somebody like Harley that can move the puck well and move his feet and not put him with maybe a Cody Ceci or something. And it leaves it a bit treacherous at times. But I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head. Like, can you contain 97-29 and try to win some of those other matchups? And part of Dallas have to win those matchups because they haven't got a ton from their depth. It's been all right. But if they can win those matchups, you feel like Dallas would be good. But we felt that way last year, at least I did. And then, but it was Edmonton that won those matchups. So yeah, it's a coin flip. It's going to be a fascinating series, and I think it's go back and forth. And of course, you got Skinner, who's maybe figuring it out again, like he did last year. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, like the Stars can't beat him now. So
goaltending is the hardest thing to understand because it just doesn't make sense. Because you look at Hellebuck.
Especially in Edmonton. Yes. Oh, Hellebuck.
That is the most prescient case study for why the position makes no sense. That is the consensus best goalie in the world for 2 straight years. And he has playoff games where he looks like he's never played the position before. It is impossible to understand.
Yeah, never won a road game. Winnipeg, just really, really insane stuff with a President's Trophy winning team. I think that's the Stanley Cup playoffs too. Like the pressure comes down to it. And that's why I felt pretty good about Dallas going into Game 6 in a lot of ways. They didn't really I feel like they didn't have pressure on them. Of course, they were up 3-1. But it's Winnipeg that has not won on the road all postseason long, and Hellebuck has looked awful. That's the real pressure, especially as a goaltender. Like you have to go in there and try to do something you haven't done against a team that's been pretty good at home. But yeah, it's hockey is baffling sometimes, what makes it beautiful and insane at the same time.
Because like we said at the top, you can have just as good of a team. I think these two teams are very even. There is not a lot of daylight between them, and I wouldn't really be surprised no matter what happens. With that in mind, I did earnestly debate flipping a coin on the show and using that as kind of the hook. But
I'm down for it.
I feel that this year's Oilers team is better than last year's Oilers team because their 5-on-5 play has been worlds better. They roll 4 lines and all of them have guys that can consistently score. I think I am going to stick to my convictions and I'm going to pick the Oilers to win this series in 7 games. Mm-hmm. I don't feel particularly good about it, but I do think this is going to be the better of the 2 playoff series between the 2 conferences.
Yeah, it should be it should be a lot of fun. And Dallas has been in some in very entertaining series here. Yeah. They've had a crazy road. That's just sort of how they go about it. And I think what I think is awesome too with both of these sides, they've gotten here again, but they've had really I think they've had really treacherous years in a lot of ways. Like it's been a lot of it hasn't been ezy for both of these sides, and they've just persevered. I mean, look at Edmonton. What they were jeopardy going down 3-0. I think it was to
28
LA.
seconds to left. They were down. They were down a goal with 28 seconds left on home ice, about to go down 3-0, and they won in overtime, and that turned the entire season around.
Yeah, and Dallas goes down 2-0 in Game 7 in the third period, like right away. Like it's unheard of to kind of, especially if you give up the first goal in a Game 7. Like the numbers don't bear that out. But you go down another, and they found a way to pull it out, and now they're here. I don't see. I'll pick the Stars, but I don't see them winning this any other way than a Game 7, right? I don't see them finishing off Edmonton on the road, so I'll take Stars in 7, and maybe Pete DeBoer's magic or whatever it is, maybe continues to hold on. At some point, it's going to end, you would think, but I'll take the Stars in 7. But as you said, Edmonton got better. I think the Stars are maybe slightly better. I don't know how much conviction I have behind that. I like really, because I loved Chris Tanev. I really do. I brought him up for the second time. I wish he was still around, but I feel like both teams got a little bit better. So fireworks, hopefully fireworks.
Don't sleep on Mr. Game 7 Cody Ceci. 3 straight Game 7s with a goal. Don't sleep on Cody Ceci if this goes 7 games. That will do it for this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Stars. We want to thank everyone that made this their first listen of the day. Please subscribe, leave 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify, subscribe over on YouTube. And if you're itching for more hockey content, be sure to check out the Locked On NHL feed featuring Locked On NHL Game Night, breaking down the games from the night before, and Locked On NHL covering the biggest stories around the league. Joey and I will talk to you guys real soon. Until then, enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs.